Well, along with your dessert, you get a treat as well. I've heard John Allison speak before. I've certainly been aware of his the modeling, if you will, essentially of his behavior. All of you in this audience are really heroes to me in terms of your ethical practices and the way essentially that you have invested both in your businesses and in your relationships. John, starting with a small bank in North Carolina that had centimillions for assets, essentially has, over the part of his career, been able to, by a conscious adoption, essentially, as a credo and way of doing business, and you will hear more about that today, so I won't scoop him, a method of doing business that really relies on the ethical basis that we hold dear, and has come to model the growth of that company into a $150 billion bank conglomerate, if you will, that is one of our sponsors today. We thank all of you who have been sponsors, because without you we wouldn't be able to hold these events. John essentially also has come to speak out a great deal on the issues of what we really need to do in this country in terms of how to get back to our basic principles. And with that as a preview, I invite John to come and replace me at this microphone, and I'm sure do a better job. John?
Good afternoon. It's really a pleasure to be here. I always enjoy having the opportunity to talk to bright young people who will be future leaders in our society, and to people that are already in a leadership role. In fact, my goal today is to talk about leadership. I know the elephant in the room is the financial crisis, and I'd be glad to talk about that in the question and answer session, but I really think if you look underlying the financial crisis at a much deeper level, we've had fundamental failures of leadership. We've had numerous failures of leadership in business. We seem to have endless failures of leadership in government. I know for the young people here, you may not think of yourselves as being leaders, but really if you look at what businesses are looking for, what other organizations, what the military is looking for, from a university of this stature, we're looking for people that will be our future leaders. So you're really being trained, we hope, to be successful leaders. And if you don't think about leading other people, we all have a self-leadership challenge. Where are we going to take ourselves? Leaders serve a variety of roles, but we think their primary responsibilities are twofold. First, they create a sense of purpose in their organizations and in themselves. And secondly, they create and support the value system that makes that purpose successful in the real world. We believe that the organizing principle of human action is purpose. Human beings are purpose-directed entities. In order to go somewhere, we have to know where we're going. Organizations, businesses, colleges, civic organizations are simply groups of human beings. For organizations to be successful, the people in those organizations must vest in the purpose of the organization. As a concrete example, BB&T is very much a purpose-directed business. And our purpose is expressed in our mission. And our mission is to literally make the world a better place to live by helping our clients achieve economic success and financial security, by creating a place where our employees can learn, grow, and be fulfilled in their work, by making the communities where we work better places to be, and thereby optimizing the long-term return to our shareholders while creating a safe and sound investment. We're not confused. In a free market, our primary fiduciary obligation is to our shareholders. We work for our shareholders. We know that. However, the only means by which to accomplish that obligation is to first do a great job for our clients, because all of our revenues come from our clients. In order to do a great job from our clients, we've got to have great people, because we're fundamentally in a people business. We've got to create the kind of environment where people want to work for BB&T. We do all that within the context of our communities, not from an altruistic perspective, but because if our communities don't do well, we won't do well. So we try to run our business in a very long-term perspective, do the right thing for clients, employees, communities, and in that context, create superior rewards for shareholders. Just like organizations need a sense of purpose, so do each of us as an individual. In fact, it's very interesting to me how many times I encounter people and they start talking about their work, and it's obvious that their work is just some kind of burden. I have to go to work. Gee, it's tough. I got to go to work. And if you think about how much time, effort, and energy you spend at work, if work is just work, boy, are you missing a lot of what life is about. And by the way, this is it. This is not practice. This is your life. If you want to have passion in your life, you have to have a sense of purpose in your work. Without purpose, work is just work. As again, a concrete example, something I say to all the BB&T employees: are you making the world a better place to live through your work? Are you really helping your clients make better decisions that improve the quality of their lives? Have you trained yourself to be able to do that? And absolutely never ever do anything that's bad for your clients, because even if you can make a profit in the short term, it will ultimately come back to haunt you. And an interesting thing happens if you do the right things for your clients. If you help them be more successful, if you help them be more financially secure, they're going to be more loyal, and you're going to be more successful. In fact, one of my themes is that life is about creating those kind of win-win relationships. And are you helping your fellow employees be successful? Many of you will be in management roles, and there's a management feedback process. Do you take that seriously? Do you provide the kind of feedback that helps your employees learn, grow, and get to be better human beings? And by the way, are you supportive of your fellow teammates, including your peers that you can view yourself in competition with? And by the way, when you support your team, when you help your employees be more successful, aren't they going to be more loyal? Aren't you going to have lower turnover? And aren't you going to be more successful in that process? And can we count on you to help with the March of Dimes and United Way's organizations that are essential to the quality of life in our community? And of course, in our business, are you making good loans? Are you providing good financial services that reward our shareholders, the people that you work for? While the content will vary, I would argue the context of purpose is the same for everybody in this room. And I think it has two components. First, I've never met anybody that didn't want to make the world a better place to live. I believe everybody in this room wants to make the world a better place to live. Interesting thought about making the world a better place to live. You don't have to go to Africa and help starving children making the world a better place to live. Businesses make the world a better place to live. Businesses provide products and services that improve the quality of our lives. In fact, I would argue one of the big differences between the United States and Africa is businesses. Good doctors make the world a better place to live. Good teachers make the world a better. Good military leaders make the world a better place to live. There's a long list of things that make the world a better place to live, but you have to believe you're making the world a better place to live. The second thing I would argue, and this is something that I think is way underemphasized, you have to do something that you want to do for you. You fundamentally have the right to your own life. You need to do something that you want to do for you. And I would argue, even if you make the world a better place to live, but you don't enjoy doing it, you have really wasted your life. You have really failed. So you need a sense of purpose that makes the world a better place to live, doing something that you want to do. The means by which we accomplish our purpose is our values, the principles by which we live our lives. I think we all are aware of ethical deviations in our society. We've had a number of them in business, and we certainly seem to have endless ethical deviations in politics. At some level, I think most people realize that values are important, but a lot of people do not use values very effectively. And the reason for that is most people kind of have a hodgepodge of beliefs. They do one thing and they feel guilty because they didn't do something else, and they really don't have an integrated value system. And very few people have really thought about what is the purpose of values. What is the purpose of values? The purpose of values is to provide us with principles that improve the probability of staying alive, being successful, and ultimately being happy. Values are really about principles that lead to success and happiness. Even having the right values, having the right principles doesn't guarantee success and happiness, because things happen in Mother Nature beyond our control, but they improve the odds. And if you think about values in that context, they're not arbitrary, they're not capricious, they don't fall out of the sky, they aren't necessarily what your moms and dads and Sunday school teachers told you when you were 3 years old. In fact, defining values is actually a scientific problem, and most people don't think of it that way, but it is a scientific problem. Here's the question. Given the laws of nature, Mother Nature, and given human nature, what principles are most likely to lead to our survival, our success, and ultimately our happiness? We have 10 core values at BB&T. As we go through these values, you'll see that they're not only non-contradictory, they're integrated. Fail on one, fail on all the values. Our first value is reality. What is. A baby's born this morning in the hospital here in Charleston, and that baby opens her eyes. And guess what? Mom's here, Dad's here, the doctor's here, the nurse is here, we're here, the trees are here. That baby doesn't get to make it up. In fact, that baby's task in life is to figure out how to stay alive, be successful, and be happy given the facts of reality. At some point, we were all that baby. We were born into this world, and we've been trying to figure out how to stay alive, be successful, and be happy given the facts of reality. At one level, that's very obvious. At another level, many people are in huge resistance to reality. They don't want it to be. And being in resistance to reality is a very destructive place to be. People make three basic mistakes in regards to reality. These are actually epistemological errors in thinking, but they relate to reality. And they have a big impact on the quality of life for the individual and the quality of life for all of us on this planet. The first error we use a metaphor for, wishing something is so does not make it so. It's a metaphor for the ultimate psychological sin, which is the act of evasion. Evasion occurs when you're presented with some piece of information that at some level you know needs to be examined. But you refuse to examine it. Oftentimes you don't even hear it because it threatens something you want to believe about yourself or you want to believe about the world. So you literally don't hear it. And when you evade, you're detached from reality, and that's a bad place to be. I grew up as a small business lender in the banking business. That's what I did for a number of years. And one of my observations is one of the primary reasons that small businesses fail is because the leader of that business evades. Things are going along fine in the business. Something happens in the economy. Something happens at home. And the leader of that business doesn't want to know it and drives that business right into the ground. Citigroup, largest financial institution in the world, multi-trillion-dollar operation, hires a group of geniuses, PhDs, off the chart, smart people to run their affordable housing, now subprime lending business. May even have been a legitimate business when they started. I guarantee you, long before we knew the disaster was coming, those really smart, intelligent people knew at some level a disaster was coming. But what did they do? They evaded. Why did they evade? They didn't want to give up their bonus. They didn't want to give up Citigroup's corporation's profit, so they drove that business right into the ground. Unfortunately, everybody evades. Our parents, our spouses, our friends often tell us about our evasions, but we don't want to hear it. The next time you hear something that you may have heard before and you know at some level that you ought to think about, have the courage to bring it to consciousness and look at it objectively. Evading is a very dangerous place to be. The second error is the belief in popularity. Reality is independent of popularity. Year 1600, 99.9% of the people on the planet were certain that the sun went around the earth. Sun comes up in the east, goes down the west. Sun goes around the earth. 1620, Galileo proves the earth goes around the sun. The fact that 99.9% of the people were certain that the sun went around the earth had no effect on the sun of the earth. Reality is independent of popularity. At some level, people know that consciously, but it's interesting to examine behavior. Have you ever been in a group where you really didn't want to go along with the group, but you went along with it because who were you to argue? I've seen a study on why students cheat at universities. And the reason students cheat at universities? Because other students cheat at universities. Reality is independent of popularity. My business recently, I understand in some way how Citigroup got into the affordable housing business, but how did a lot of banks smaller than BB&T get into that business? I've had the opportunity to talk to a number of CEOs of those banks, and they have some interesting explanations, but ultimately their explanation is, hey, everybody's in that business, why don't we get in that business? If you look at great entrepreneurs, they often go against popularity. They see things that other people don't see. The third mistake in regards to reality is the belief in authority, and this mistake has probably done as much controllable damage as any error. Reality is independent of authority. 1620, Galileo publishes his book, proves that the earth goes around the sun. The Pope, the intellectual, spiritual leader of Western civilization, a highly educated man, reads Galileo's book. He doesn't like it. It threatens his most fundamental beliefs, so he promptly puts Galileo under house arrest for the rest of his life, tries to destroy every copy of Galileo's book. Fortunately, a few sneak out, lead to Newton, lead to the Industrial Revolution. Guess what? Whether the Pope liked it or not, the earth kept going around the sun. Reality is independent of authority. More recent example, the big authorities in the financial business are Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and Fitch. the rating agencies. And these rating agencies are government-sanctioned agencies. They have a monopoly in the rating business. Unfortunately, these rating agencies made huge errors resulting in trillions of dollars of losses throughout the global economy. Bad thing. We certainly shouldn't feel good about what they did. On the other hand, interesting thing about the rating agencies, we were wise enough or lucky enough not to buy a lot of those bonds. And the reason for that is we didn't take their ratings on faith. We went back and looked at how they were rating these instruments, and we looked at our own experience back in the 1990s, and we said, if we just have a real estate correction equal to 1990, a lot of these AAA bonds are really not going to be AAA bonds. So we chose not to acquire those kind of assets. It is true that you have to rely on authorities, but you have to judge your authorities. You have to make sure that your authorities have rational arguments for their positions, because reality is independent of authority. One of the most important aspects of reality is the law of cause and effect, or the law of causality. If you want to visualize the law of causality, you can see one billiard ball hitting another billiard ball, and say the first billiard ball caused the second billiard ball to move. The law of causality, however, is a lot different than that. What the law of causality says is that everything in nature has a nature, and everything must act consistent with its nature. Everything in nature has a nature, and everything must act consistent with its nature. Billiard balls have to act like billiard balls. Elephants have to act like elephants. And as a human being, we have a nature, and we have to act consistent with our nature. We have no option. However, we are not billiard balls. We're not deterministic. One of the most fundamental aspects of our nature is we have free will. We have to make decisions all the time. We have to make choices. The fundamental self-evidency of free will is a set of choices that you've been making since you were very young, that you literally make every few seconds, and that only you can make. And that choice is to focus your mind or not, to be here or not. And when you're out of focus, you're detached from reality. Some of you will be here during this presentation, some of you won't. Nobody can stay in focus all the time. In a presentation like this, you probably should stay in focus. On Friday night might be a good time to go out of focus. But you do choose whether or not to stay in focus, to be here or not. One of the interesting things that will happen, by the way, during this presentation, I'll probably say something that you don't want to hear. And I guarantee you, one of the ways that people evade is that they go out of focus. And when you're out of focus, you're detached from reality. The other unique aspect of human nature is that we have the capacity to think rationally, to think objectively. Everything that's alive has a method of staying alive. A lion has claws to hunt with. A deer has speed to avoid the hunter. We have the capacity to think. And our capacity to think is literally our only means of survival, success, and happiness. There's no other way to do it. There's no shortcuts. There's no free lunch. We're fortunate the great genius of history, Aristotle, taught us how to think. He did that back in 300 BC. He said we ought to begin with premises based on the facts, use induction and deduction to derive conclusions, to integrate those conclusions without contradiction. The fundamental rule of logic is to avoid contradiction. Then that conclusion could become a premise for a higher level of thinking. Despite knowing how to think since 300 BC, a lot of times we don't think that way. We use a muddled kind of thinking process, and we get a muddled outcome. When you violate your means of survival, success, and happiness, bad things happen to you. It's also interesting to look at how we try to improve our thinking process. People go to college, they go to graduate programs, which is a very legitimate thing to do. However, the single biggest driver in thinking is your premises. If you have a flawed premise, you will by necessity have a bad conclusion. If you build a 20-story building on quicksand, the building's going to fall over. Premises drive conclusions. In fact, interesting, next time you're in a serious argument with somebody, I guarantee you that the argument is largely about premises. Premises that you and whoever you're arguing with, neither one hold consciously. You don't really, in many cases, really realize what you're arguing about. Premises drive conclusions. It's interesting to reflect on the most important premises you have. Your fundamental beliefs, your most basic beliefs in which you built your whole worldview. Your most fundamental beliefs came from your moms, dads, Sunday school teachers, kindergarten teachers when you were very young. And where'd they get their beliefs? From their moms, dads, Sunday school teachers, kindergarten teachers when they were very young. Where'd they get their beliefs? From their moms, dads, Sunday school teachers, kindergarten teachers when they were very young. It's interesting to reflect on those beliefs. First, they're primitive. Secondly, the odds are very high that you have a hodgepodge of beliefs. Some that make a lot of sense, some that maybe don't make a lot of sense. You probably can see things in your parents, even if you love your parents, that keep them from being as successful and particularly as happy as they could be. You may have a different set of content, but you probably have the same context. The most powerful thing you can do to improve your thinking process is have the courage to objectively look at your fundamental beliefs as an adult and reject all beliefs which are inconsistent with reality. They can't be. And reject all contradictions, because contradictions cannot exist in reality. Induction and deduction. Deduction is where we go from the general to the specific. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Deduction is a concrete application of a general principle. It's a very important thinking tool. We're fortunate Aristotle pretty much outlined the rules for deduction in 300 BC. In groups like this, people deduce very well. It's my observation. In fact, if you make a deductive error, the odds are very high that it's not an intellectual error, but it's a psychological error. It's usually a form of evasion. As useful as deduction is, far more important is induction. Induction is where you go from the concrete things in the real world to the general principle. How did you decide that all men were mortal? Where did that come from? In fact, induction is really what makes human beings human. The fundamental expression of induction is concept formation. Concept formation is something that all human beings can do. Some can do it better than others. When you were very young, you were able to look at chairs and see they're like each other and different than other things. You developed a word concept called chair. And then you were able to look at tables and see they were like each other and different than other things. And you developed a word concept called table. And your parents got real happy. And if you have children, you get real happy about that because you realize that is the beginning of the thinking process. And then you were able to make a big intellectual leap. You looked at tables and chairs that don't look like each other at all, and you developed a word concept called furniture because you grasped that they had a common purpose. And you did that all the way up to how the world ought to be run, whether we ought to have free enterprise systems, who ought to be president, the most complex ideas. That's exactly how you do it. And so how well you develop your concepts determines the effectiveness of your thinking process. A couple thoughts about concept formation. Concept formation is what makes the human mind so powerful. Think about something as simple as chairs. In the real world, there are literally billions of chairs. If you had to deal with them individually or perceptually like an animal does, that's all you could think about was chairs. Of course, there wouldn't be billions of chairs. In one concept, you grasp billions of things in the real world. The better job you do of developing your concepts, the more effective thinker you are. That's really what makes the human mind work. The second thought about concepts, and this really deals with two big philosophical issues. People talk about having an open mind, and having an open mind is appropriate in the proper context. But having an open mind does not require that you be skeptical. You take something as simple as chairs. You know a lot more about chairs as an adult than you did as a 2-year-old. However, if what you learned as a child was right, it's still right, you just know more. So you can be very certain, and yet every concept you ought to keep open in. You can learn more about anything forever, but that doesn't mean you have to be skeptical and you have to be uncertain. Third thought about concept formation. Concept formation is hierarchical. You start with tables and chairs, you move up to furniture, you move up to truth, beauty, how's the universe organized, those very complex ideas. Give you the good news and the bad news. Good news is you probably did a great job on tables and chairs. The bad news is the odds are almost everybody in here cheated on higher level concepts. Where'd you get your most higher level concepts? The odds are you got them from an authority. They got them from an authority. They got them from an authority. And that's often how we get higher level concepts. Your most complex ideas, how the world ought to be run, love, truth, ought to be traceable back to reality. If they're not, then they're not true. I talk about that with the business group. In business, in the world we're in today, and I think this is particularly important for the students here, it's a new world. We're now in competition with 8 billion people on this planet that are far better educated than they used to be, are much closer to us through technology than they used to be, are willing to work a lot harder than us for a lot less. That requires that you absolutely be a master of your field of endeavor. If you're not a master of your field of endeavor, you're going to have a difficult time being successful in the kind of world we're in. And if you look at people that have mastered any field of endeavor, what they've been able to do is develop concepts that enable them to make better decisions, quicker, more accurate decisions. Probably some of you in your university experience, you've had some really good teachers and some not so good teachers. The really good teachers have mastered the material so they can communicate it to you in an efficient and effective manner. You probably had some good doctors and some bad doctors, and the really good doctors can take those symptoms and come back with the right information to help you cure that kind of problem. They master that. In our business, we have lenders. We have master lenders and lenders that are not so good. And the master lenders can make better decisions because they have integrated concepts that help make them decisions. And as you move through your career and trying to become a master of your field of endeavor, it's important that you develop the concepts that help you make better decisions. And the way you do that's interesting. It's something I say to the employees of BB&T. I don't expect our employees to be geniuses. Everybody can't be a genius. But I do challenge you to be committed to being a lifelong learner, and in that context to have an active mind. An active mind. And if you look at somebody that's committed to being a lifelong learner, they tend to read more, they take more advantage of educational seminars, but they're particularly effective at learning from experience. They're particularly effective. And you see a lot of successful business thinkers, what really distinguishes them is their capacity to learn from their experiences. And if you look at people that are superior experiential learners, they do two basic, profound things well.